Welcome to Council Room 2024. Our first panel on Sunday is being hosted by Greg Bakun. Please welcome him to the stage.
Wow, hello. How's everyone doing this morning? Cold? What is it out there right now? So a pretty warm Minnesota day, isn't it? I'm Greg Bakun, and I am kind of a big fan of British archive television. Those who know me will know that I do a lot of collecting of it. I talk about it, I write about it, I make videos about it. It's one of those things that has been with me my whole life, and back in the day, they'd release a lot of these shows that I loved on VHS, early DVD releases, and they always kind of looked the same. Basically, whatever was on the shelf, stuff, maybe if it was shot on film, the film recording didn't look that great. There's just, we didn't know if stuff like extra scenes existed. We didn't know if there were, or film inserts, if those still existed from different shows or whatnot. And over the past, I would say, really discounting Doctor Who, because we all love the Doctor Who releases, right? And they put a lot of love and care into those. But it took a while, I think, for other programs to be able to get that love and attention as well. And so one of the things I do is I love to talk about it. I love to showcase it. And somebody who I've met a little while ago has been honestly just killing it when it comes to helping put out the best quality releases. The problem is not a whole lot of them have made it over to the US yet, and so some of the stuff we're going to be talking about today may actually make your mouth water, but you may not be able to get them yet unless you get them from Amazon UK or something like that. But I want to talk about it because our guest today, Richard Latto, is a content producer. He's an archival specialist. He has been working on a lot of the Blu-ray releases that come out. He's been helping out on the Doctor Who collections. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about also some of the stuff he's been working on, like just in November, it was the complete Blackadder set on Blu-ray in the UK, which is quite the task as far as I'm concerned. We're going to talk about that. If you have questions as we go along, we don't have a mic, and that's okay. You can just raise your hand, and we will get to you as well. I am really excited, and I want to introduce my friend, Richard Latto. Thank you very much for joining us, Richard.
Hi there, Greg. Thank you very much for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you very much. What part of UK are you in?
I'm in not so sunny Southampton in Hampshire, which is right on the south coast, and it's very cold at the moment. They're threatening that it's about to snow any day, so lots of British people are doing the traditional British thing of panicking as soon as they see the first snowflake.
What do you mean panicking? What about that stiff upper lip we always hear about?
It's gone, long gone.
So, I think one of the things I want to start on, since this is a Doctor Who convention, I realize I don't know how much information I gave you about what we're doing today. So I don't even know if you knew that there was a convention. No, I know you knew that part. But this is a Doctor Who convention. It's been going on for, this is the 11th one, called Council Room, and Minnesota is very much a kind of a hotbed for Doctor Who fandom. A lot of us have been watching for years. We love the show, before we're going to get back into kind of like how you got into what you're doing now, which is basically kind of a sideline, isn't it? Is it? I mean, do you consider what you're doing now your main job, or this is just what you do to kind of, when it's threatening to snow, it keeps you off the streets?
This is very much a sideline for me. My full-time role is with the BBC. I work primarily in radio. I do a radio show called Stereo Underground. I do various other bits for radio, a bit for television as well. I've done a few half-hour documentaries, some of them news-based, some of them history, some of them pop culture. And of course, everything now is online. So they're trying to get people to think about what you do for radio and television and how it would work on an online platform. There's a lot of commissions for things like BBC Sounds, BBC iPlayer before it goes onto an actual bespoke radio or television channel. So yeah, everything else is very much a sideline for me, but really enjoyable. And it's the type of work that I would love to do more and more of. And it has really snowballed for me, particularly over the last few years. It seems like there is a real hunger to put out quality products across a whole different range of genres. So obviously, Doctor Who science fiction is something that everyone talks about and is done fantastically well. But comedy for the BBC, I'd like to think that the two releases that I've been involved in recently, both The Young Ones and Blackadder, has shown that there is a real hunger and a real market for putting a lot of work, a lot of care, love and passion into extensive, definitive releases of comedy that work well. And the work I've been doing with Fabulous Films, which is on a whole range of different children's shows as well that have gone down very well.
Is it difficult to persuade these studios to go the extra mile, to rescan film, to get it restored, get the video picture restored? Is it easier now, or is every time still kind of like trying to even if it's just a little bit, just like trying to get them to understand the audience now?
That's a really good question, Greg. It's both. I've been to certain television channels. I've had meetings here in this country with satellite TV channels, and I've said to them, why don't we do restored versions of programs that you're putting out? And they will literally come back to me and go, people are quite happy watching the rubbish versions we're already putting out. Yeah. And you think, no, that's not what it's all about. This is an opportunity to not just produce a better master material, but also what else we can find on that journey. So many times we've done the scanning of raw materials. The Young Ones is a classic example. The film materials for that we had scanned unearthed material that had never been seen publicly before, that was filmed on location. That stuff with Terry Jones in the Hammer horror spoof episode Nasty, all of those extra lines, the longer scenes, some completely deleted scenes, they would never have been seen. There's a reason to go the extra mile. People are gradually getting there. But I don't know what it's like in America, but here people are now buying 50-inch television screens from their bedroom. It's ridiculous. So the quality of what it looks like on screen is incredibly important. But there is one thing that always helps whenever you're negotiating and trying to convince someone, and I can give you an example of that visually on screen there. That is the original episode 1 film can, which had the negatives in for Wurzel Gummidge. So that was episode 1 from 1979. You can see James Hill's writing on the can from when he actually put the label on, having shot it. It's filthy. My hands are absolutely dirty. It's still so rusty, but it's been recanned because they were so rusty. But when you find an asset like that, and then you go to a company like Fabulous Films and say, we found out a way to do it, that's much easier than going somewhere and going, well, we could do this, but I don't know if the film exists.
Right. And that's the other thing too, and that's one of the things that it seems to be that you specialize in, if I may, is that I don't think any of us. Now, how many are familiar with Wurzel Gummidge out there? So for those who do not know, Wurzel Gummidge was a series that aired in the UK in the late 70s, going in the 80s, and then it came back as Wurzel Gummidge Down Under. All shot on film. Probably, Richard, would it be safe to say, well, I mean, how would it have been broadcast back in the day? Would it have been broadcast from film or transferred to videotape?
It would have. The original series would have gone off film prints with a magnetic soundtrack and a backup optical. And it was very seat of your pants. You didn't quite know whether it was going to work or not. Most of the time it was okay, but if you look at off airs, it's quite wobbly, it's quite rough.
Yeah. And John Pertwee was Wurzel Gummidge. It's a fan favorite, especially in UK. I don't necessarily remember if it ever made its way over here. I know copies did, but I don't think it did. And for years, I think the general understanding was that the film negatives did not exist or couldn't be found. And then one day, this gentleman, Richard Latto, posted, "Guess what I found? Guess what I found?" And that kind of seems to be your kind of your modus operandi. It says you pop up in these threads, you tell us all these cool things you find, and next thing you know, there's a release of it. I think there's a little bit, might be one or two more steps in there. But if you want to go into a little bit about what that's like, and because I know any release that you work on, there's that stage of gathering and then seeing what is available, what exists. Something like Wurzel, was there was there a specific reason, like you were hoping to try to get a release done for that, or was it more of you're just working with people in the know and just seeing what exists? I'm just curious.
It's more the latter, to be honest. It was real luck. I knew that the masters for Wurzel were missing, that the current masters were appalling. The ones that had previously been released on DVD by a now defunct company called Delta were practically black and white. The sound was incredibly poor on some of them. They absolutely dire. The Christmas special in particular was like watching something through mud just dripping down the front of the television screen. It was awful. And it was just kind of said amongst people like, oh, yes, of course, such a shame, because no one knows where the negatives are or any prints are. And I kind of had that in the back of my mind. And I was working on something completely different. I was working on a Peter Sellers documentary, and I was trying to find the missing scenes from Casino Royale, which I did eventually find, but somewhere else.
Oh, wow.
And it led me to a laboratory in Berkshire, in Slough, and it was where lots of things were originally developed. But after they'd been developed, they never left the laboratory, and the negatives were put into their vaults. They weren't archived correctly.
Right.
It wasn't archived in an amazing state, I have to be honest, and they'd admit that. It wasn't really a purposeful archive, but hence why it looks so awful and rusty like it does now.
Right, yeah.
But when I went up there, I said to the guy, well, actually, even before I went there, I said to the guy on the phone, have you got any Casino Royale? Have you got a list of your holdings? And he said, I'll do you the liberty of sending you an Excel spreadsheet of everything we have, which is amazing when anyone does that, because it's a very rare occurrence, but it's so useful. And I looked down the spreadsheet, and there was BBC material on there that was missing. There was lots of film material that I could recognize from TV, movies, other general films adverts, and then right at the bottom it said Wurzel, and it had Wurzel, Wurzel, Wurzel written on about 4 or 5 lines, and some of them said couple of boxes, negs, couple of boxes, prints. And I rang the guy up, and I think his name was Steve. This was about 5-6 years ago, and I said, Steve, have you got that Wurzel Gummidge material? Because I'm pretty sure they're all missing. And he said, oh, I'm not sure, I'll have a look. I think we may have a couple. And he rang me back an hour later, and he said, you better come up here. We found about 200. And
Wow.
I was up there the next week, and we went through, it was myself, a couple of other guys, we went through all the boxes that they managed to pull out, and we did a stock check, and it was the original camera negatives for every single episode from the first, the second, the fourth series, the Christmas special, and there were backup prints of all of them, including the third series. So everything on film, and we couldn't believe it. So then we had to ascertain who had the rights. It was Fabulous Films had just got the rights, coincidentally, I think, because there was talk of a new series, a reboot series,
that's right,
on the TV channels here. And then became it wasn't hard to convince Fabulous to do this, but obviously it boils down to money, how much it's going to sell. And the Doctor Who releases are incredibly popular in this country. Everyone knows that they're big hitters. You see in the charts of Amazon, they do very, very well. And we said, well, look, there's going to be a lot of Doctor Who fans that will buy Wurzel Gummidge simply because John Pertwee is in it and is playing the lead, and it's so fondly regarded. And eventually we managed to find the talented team at ITV Content Delivery in Leeds who did the scanning. They did a lot of the restoration. I then worked and did all of the sound. We put together a huge list of extras. We wanted to trump how many there were on the average Doctor Who release and try and do more.
Nice.
I think we managed to, but even with significantly less staff. And yeah, we were just thrilled. And then after that sold very well. And then I was commissioned to look after Down Under, which fortunately was the series made in New Zealand. It was all stored in a proper archive, the New Zealand Film Institute over there. And the producer of that was still alive, so we got a fresh interview, did commentaries, did lots of stuff. But it's amazing when you speak to people about these properties, and I've had this with pretty much everything I've worked on, they're delighted to be part of it. They really are. I've done a lot of Doctor Who bits and pieces over the years, whether it's for the Blu-rays or for broadcast. And people aren't surprised when you ring them up and ask them about Doctor Who if they're connected to Doctor Who, because that's been done a lot.
Yeah.
And with that, my challenge has always been to find fresh gold, fresh meat, fresh information, fresh content that really gives it a purpose at the heart of it. But with something like Wurzel Gummidge that's never really been examined in that kind of forensic detail before, everyone's just delighted to talk about it. And I wish I could tell you, we're working on some really exciting children's releases.
We won't tell anyone. You're good. No, you all promise? They're slow. Anyway, go ahead.
There was a leaflet in with Wurzel Down Under, which did show some upcoming releases for Fabulous Films. That includes Paddington Bear, that includes The Perishers, that includes The Wombles. These are things we're working on right now, and it's an absolute joy. It really is, because what I'm seeing coming back from the restorers, I grew up watching these shows. I've never seen them look so utterly amazing. And in high definition, who'd thought in 2024 we're talking about watching The Wombles in high definition or Paddington Bear, but it works, and thankfully we've managed to track down the assets that we need to do it.
Wow. And I mean, I don't think anyone ever thought that something like Wurzel would be available in such quality with such love. I mean, it's been released a couple of times, right? And it's always just been the usual type of release. I mean, I always wondered if that even is something that sometimes you get worried about with the number of times something has been previously released, to be able to go to them and say, well, hey, if we do it this way, though, this is going to be definitive for them. And I think that has to be a speed bump in some way.
Oh, completely. And this is exactly what I was thinking with the young ones and with Blackadder. As a fan who bought the VHSs, bought the DVDs, why would I buy a Blu-ray of a series that I know so well have got and could potentially just watch on BritBox or on BBC iPlayer here? Well, it has to go that extra mile, doesn't it? It has to have that special reason. And with those releases, particularly you mentioned Blackadder, we wanted to put on material that had never been seen before. So there are hours of studio rushes on the Blackadder release, which have simply never been released. They haven't even really been used in documentaries. I think very, very brief snippets of just a matter of seconds have appeared. But to actually sit down, and one of the episodes, I think it was the Series 4 one, Corporal Punishment, the one about him shooting the pigeon. You can actually sit down and watch the entire night of the entire episode being recorded at BBC Television Centre with the warm-up and with everything in between for when they do the resets and the remounts, with Richard Curtis keeping the crowd cooking. It's amazing. I mean, I can't be the only person that enjoys watching that kind of stuff.
No, and I mean, and I would say for those in here to send a note to who is it even in America now that handles BBC? There's BBC Studios Home Entertainment, BBC Home Entertainment. Let them know that you want to see this stuff, because I mean, Young Ones and Blackadder, you know that they're going to sell well over here. It's just a shame. It's first of all, it's a fantastic set. I have it. I know a couple of you out here have it as well. It's wonderful, Richard. It's so wonderful to see something that we love so much to be given the love. I do have to ask though, because there is a reason for it. One thing that we were all hoping would have been on there that isn't is obviously the pilot.
Yes.
And just could you help us understand why that can't be on there? What's even weirder about that, Richard, as you well know, it was aired this year in the UK.
Yes.
So
Yes.
it is a little confusing that it's not on the box set.
One of the first things I said when the box set was given the green light was, well, we have to put the pilot on here. And I was told, that may not be possible. And the reason is pretty clear. If you look around online, there's a wonderful blog done by the person that got that pilot broadcast on a satellite television channel here called Gold, that specializes in old repeats of old comedy. And he did that by the sheer tenacity of a year or maybe even 2 years of chipping away and getting the relevant permissions. Because of the way the contracts were drawn up, because of the fact that it was a pilot, it wasn't intended to be broadcast. If it had been greenlit in that form, maybe that would have become episode 1 or part of the series, but of course it wasn't. No. It was substantially changed. The whole portrayal of Blackadder was changed. They changed the actor of Baldrick. It was Philip Fox, I think it was, in the pilot. And then Tony Robinson came in, even though they originally wanted Tony Robinson. It was frustrating, but we tried so hard. Yeah. And if we'd have put that on there, a whole load of other stuff could not have gone on.
Oh, interesting.
And it was weighing up what's worth it. And I personally thought that the studio rushes from series 2, 3, 4 were so, and Cavalier years, bizarrely, they appeared. Yeah. They're quite rough, but they're on there. I thought they were so fascinating, and we wanted all of that. We wanted a load of interviews, well, to come from across the years, which we put into I think we called it a ye olde cunning compendium, which is very difficult to say, but not so difficult just to read. And we did that, and the pilot, we would have loved it on there, but it just was not possible, and it is a shame. What I will say, though, is that if you saw it on that channel, you're unlikely to see it again.
Yeah.
And I think as a viewer of that channel and a keen follower of it, it was broadcast, it was repeated once, it has not been repeated again. It was not available on any catch-up service. It was 2 chances to see that, and that's it. And of course, people are going to pirate it, and people are going to share it and put it around online.
I refuse to believe that. I refuse, Richard. No.
But obviously, we tried our best, but we'd like to think that the rest of the package makes up for it. And one thing I did say was that we really, really, really needed to write on the outside of the box an acknowledgement that we knew about the pilot, because we didn't want anyone to look at it and go, they've forgotten about the pilot. Yeah. And that would have been so insulting to everyone involved after how hard we worked. And so that's why it's that kind of faux Baldrick, badly written blurb of him saying that he swapped the pilot for a turnip or something, which is, is perfectly in the style of Baldrick. I got that idea from, if you remember the old VHS releases, I had to dig them out of my loft, and we rescanned them, and we used them as the basis for the artwork for the box set. And I said the Christmas Carol blurb, which was written in the style of Baldrick in places, right, that should be used. And it was, and I was pleased with that. But the one really towering achievement that I was so thrilled we managed to get sorted, which cost me so much time, was Back and Forth, the Millennium Special.
Yes.
Now that was it's only ever been seen in standard definition. I think the company that owned it only had it on a standard definition digibeta, and they said, no, there's no HD assets. I tried everywhere. And this went on for days, weeks, turned into a couple of months. And eventually I spoke to the producer of the program, who had a word with someone very senior, and it was then located within 12 hours.
Wow.
So it wasn't archived in the most obvious of places, but lots of assets were pulled out. And do you know what? I even spoke to the projectionist at the Millennium Dome who used to show it on 70mm, and we even found a 70mm copy, but that was blown up from the 35, and we actually found a mix of mainly the 35mm negs, but also bits of prints, and we managed to basically get the whole thing built together. But personally, I think that looks absolutely stunning on that box set. I'm so glad it's from the film.
It does. I just watched it on New Year's Eve, and it seemed appropriate. It is so wonderful, and I just want to clarify. I wanted to ask about the pilot because I wasn't sure, but you are absolutely right. The pilot itself is fun, but I don't think it's sustainable as being like something that maybe I'd go back to anyway all that often. Where the other stuff, it just helps tell that story of 4 series of something I love so much, speaking personally. So, and you can't get it here. So just remember that, folks. It'd be nice to get it over here because Blackadder is a big comedy over here for us who watch British television stuff, and I hope that it finds its way over here sooner than later. Same with the young ones getting, because I mean, for a while we were getting exactly the same thing that was being released in the UK. The 25th anniversary Young Ones set, or I think it was the 25th anniversary was the last one that was released on DVD. We got that over here as well. So it's really, I mean, it's nice to see all that work put onto it. I also want to invite, if anyone has any questions, feel free to go up to the microphone. You're more than welcome to take part in this conversation as well. Richard, do you know who else we have at this convention this year?
No.
I don't know if you've heard of him, Sylvester McCoy.
He rings a bell, yeah.
Yeah. So one of the things that you've worked on a lot of Doctor Who stuff, but one of the things that I think you should get a medal for, and what I'm going to say this is not about the quality of the season, because I love it, but the mammoth task you had to endure by, if anyone owns the season 24 Blu-ray set, all of those studio compilations, that's this gentleman right here. And you're still sane. And they brought in a 1-inch machine to your house, right?
Oh, well, I should be careful what I admit to here. I rescued a 1-inch machine from the skip at the BBC, is the real honest answer.
Wow.
And it's been in my house to my wife's delight for too long, as she says. It's downstairs. We've moved since then, and I'm going to reassemble it downstairs because I need to do some other 1-inch transfers pretty urgently. But that was mammoth. And do you know the scariest part of doing all of those tapes was when I agreed
Is that you're
to
blind
do it.
now? No, just kidding.
Yeah. When I agreed to do it, they said, okay, great, we'll get a guy to bring them down in a truck. And then this truck pulled up, and it was 2 people, and they were carrying in crate after crate after crate. I think it was about 13, 14 big, heavy crates, because I think there were, I've had counselling to block it out of my mind, but I think there was about 150 1-inch tapes there.
Yeah.
And the way I had to organise them was I had a pile for Time in the Rani in my lounge. I had a pile for Paradise Towers in the hallway. I had a pile for Dragonfire upstairs. And yeah, it was interesting and really enjoyable. But the Delta and the Bannerman tapes, everything was there. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was 22 hours of studio rushes we put on that release.
I remember that there was, in season 24, because if anyone ever heard of the book Wiped by Richard Molesworth, he details everything that's in the BBC archives. And I don't think this is in these 1-inches aren't in the BBC archive, though, are they? This is something that was saved.
The BBC wanted to throw out studio rushes, and BBC Worldwide said, well, we'll have them because they might be useful, and thank goodness they did, so they were stored at another location. But yeah, the Delta and the Bannermen, I think, is the best represented Doctor Who story there is.
Yeah, I think so. Beyond 5 Doctors?
Yes, possibly. I think Five Doctors was a simpler production.
True.
Delta running longer had more, and it had
And
more of a
OB.
mix of all OB.
Yeah.
And it was a variety of different 1-inch formats as well. Some of them were the small ampexes, so stuff like the motorbike sequences were shot with portable devices because obviously they had to be zooming around. And what was spooky was there was a guy who sadly is no longer with us who shot the blooper reel. Well, say blooper reel, it was a rap party, wasn't it, for Delta?
Yeah.
And he had a load of photos, and I was going through the photos, and in some of them you could see people handling those tapes and putting them on the machine with the numbering on, and I was like, oh my goodness, this is the same tape I have in my hand here 40 years later.
That's awesome.
That was crazy, but we could have done so much more. There is another series where I have transferred a lot of tapes already, and I'm trying to convince them that we could easily put on 10 hours per story of studio rushes. I'm not sure whether that's possible. Do you know the biggest problem with doing that? And I feel sorry for these people, they all have to be subtitled. So subtitling a 10-hour studio tape, location tape for Delta and the Bannermen is hard enough. But if you think these are people that have probably never watched Doctor Who, that don't know the alien names, the planets mentioned, the species mentioned, the intricacies and the quirky spellings, it must be a tough gig. So I think we're a bit limited as to how much can be affordable subtitling.
Yeah. And just curious on the workflow on that. What you're doing then is you are taking the tape. Are you then transferring them to a digital format, then going through and cutting them up?
Yeah, so what I do is I put in another step to make it even more complicated for myself, but as a safety, I transfer it from 1-inch to DV cam, and then I transfer it from DV cam to digital. I think it's safer that way because also these tapes are so old and so fragile. You can see lots of oxide dropping off of them as you use them occasionally. Some are better than others, but I just want to be able to capture it as raw as possible. And if I was to digitize it and something was going to go wrong with the digitization, that would be a crisis if I then couldn't play the tape again, or there was a quirk on it or whatever, or it had a fold. So I thought, well, no, let's get it on DV cam, then digitize that. So I do have crates of DV cams around here now full of Doctor Who season 24. 26 was a long one. Trial and a Time Lord 23 was a long one. And the Five Doctor stuff, how long was that? I think that was 3.5 hours worth of rushes for that story. I didn't find that as interesting as I'd hoped. It was a very safe, very puritanical set. Season 24, there was material that we couldn't put on the studio rushes where things went wrong on the studio floor. Also, the other thing you get desensitized to, if you sit down and watch a film with a lot of cursing in, you kind of get blind to it after a while. And there's a lot of swearing in some of these studio tapes.
I bet.
And you just, you miss it because you get used to it. And sometimes it's just it's actors under their breath that's picked up on the microphone, and it completely passes you by. Here's a quiz question for you, Greg. Who do you think swore the most during the Five Doctors tapes?
Let's see. Give me a second here.
It's one of the Doctors.
What? Okay. Well, let's ask the crowd a little bit. Who do you? How many of you think that it would be Peter Davison? Said one of the Doctors. John Pertwee. Troughton. All right, and then was it Herndl? It was Herndl.
It was. He was swearing the most. Richard Herndl was a real potty mouth, prolific swearer on there, and it was quite awkward, particularly in the chess scene with the Cybermen. And I thought he would have sworn more in front of the other Doctors, but the pressure of performing in front of them. But yeah, it just passes you by after a while. You just get used to it.
Oh, wow. That's funny. What's that? What's that? Well, and here's the thing, and partially probably one of the reasons why it is cut out. I mean, apart from maybe bleeping it, is that raises the rating on it on the releases, right?
It raises the rating, but there's also this rule that you can't have a doctor in costume swearing.
Oh, is it really? I didn't know that. It's like,
Yeah.
When did that rule start?
No, but that's what I was told.
Okay.
So any doctor swear. I don't know whether that would stick then for the companions, but I'm pretty sure they get very concerned if there's someone in costume because, of course, it's the brand as well, isn't it?
Sure. My goodness. All right.
It could be clipped by someone online out of context, couldn't it?
Yeah,
Which never happens.
absolutely. It could be used for evil. What's your question?
It's not a question, just a comment. I just wanted to mention that McCoy slipped the F word in front of us yesterday, but he was not in costume.
Wasn't he? I kind of think everything he wears is kind of a version of his costume, I think. But yeah, that's funny. He's been killing it here this weekend, Richard. He really has. It's been really
nice guy.
Yeah, it's been great. What other Doctor Who stuff have you been working on that? And before I finish asking that question, just to kind of put an end to the loop here. Season 20 is being released here in the U.S. is it April? April? Okay, so the Five Doctors is on that. All the work that's been going into all the season 20 is out here in April. What other Doctor Who stuff have you been working on, Richard?
You could probably spot which ones I've been working on because I love to cram in as many clips from other BBC programmes as possible. So things like the Stuart Fell piece about his history as a stuntman, not just on Doctor Who, but on all the other wonderful programmes he worked on. We got loads of great clips on there from all the BBC sitcoms he was on, from some of the dramas as well, Blake's Seven material. And there was also, that was the same box set as the Michael E. Bryant documentary, where Michael, I met him a long time ago. We did a lovely radio hour, and he said, whenever I'm over in the UK, Richard, we want to meet up. And I said, that's great. Well, why don't we meet up and make a programme? And so we had that commissioned by Russell at Studios, which was great because he's such a raconteur and so easygoing. He's got such great stories across a whole range of different Doctor Who eras. There aren't many people that can tell such detailed anecdotes about Hartnell, Troughton, Pertwee and Baker. Yeah. And he did. And then we went off and we explored the other shows that he was part of. We, clips of Howard's Way and Blake's Seven and Warship. But we managed to find his first appearance on screen when he was trying to be an actor in Billy Bunter, which was quite a nice surprise for him. So that was good. I also did the making of Logopolis. We also did Here's the Future on season 24. That was a bit of an epic, telling the story of a very difficult year of production at the BBC from a team that obviously was trying to make a programme that BBC wasn't particularly keen on them still to make. So that was quite a meaty one to do. The Patricia Quinn, Lady Stevens, she was lovely. Again, we managed to get loads of great clips in there of other BBC productions, and the studio tapes for Dragonfire were really useful because they helped illustrate how it was on set, what kind of mood, what kind of tone that she had. And it all started when I did the making of Logopolis, and we also did, straight after that, was it the Deep Roy? I think we did a Deep Roy piece that was filmed in America, and we edited it over here. I wish I could tell you some of the really exciting things that are coming up.
Oh, go on.
If you're a fan of Doctor Who, you're going to be pleased. Is all I could probably say. But
anyone a fan of Doctor Who in here? Okay, so you're going to be pleased.
The only other thing I'd say is I really enjoyed working on that radio piece that we did with Sean Pertwee to mark what would have been his father's centenary. And Sean has been incredibly supportive with all the work, and so has the Pertwee family with the Wurzel set. If you're a Pertwee fan, you're not going to be disappointed in the future. And also, I've got some amazing bits and pieces regarding Patrick Troughton that have never been seen before, including his final ever appearance on the BBC in costume, in character as the Doctor, which I believe has been completely forgotten about. And we've also found some very rare archive of him, very sadly, just a few days before he left the UK to go to his last convention. Now, I'm not saying any of those box sets are coming up immediately. I have no idea as to what the precise running order is, but I'd like to hope that obviously the rest of them are coming at some point.
Yeah, that there's a lot of good things coming our way. We have a question. Hello.
Actually, it's a comment question kind of thing going on here. Thank you. And you have been doing the work that I love, because I'm a classic junkie. I prefer the wagging cardboard sets and the spray painted bubble wrap. Absolutely adore that. So your work is fantastic.
Pleasure.
Thank you. Now the question is: have you worked with a guy in the UK called Jonathan Baines? He does a lot of he produces a lot of Doctor Who classic. Sometimes he does more modern stuff, but it's definitely a fan-produced thing, and his research is really fantastic. And I was just curious if you had met this person. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's incredibly kind of you. You know, it's a pleasure and a privilege to do this work. It really is a labour of love, an absolute joy. And no, I haven't met Jonathan. I'm aware of his work. I'm aware of a few people that are doing some incredible work, particularly I see on YouTube as well. And it's helpful, but it also keeps the pressure on, doesn't it, with Doctor Who? Because it's got to be one of the most researched and examined television series of all time, which means when you're doing something for it, you've got to make sure you've got something fresh and of interest. But I'll do a search. I'll see if I can find out more about Jonathan. Thank you.
That's cool. Thank you for. Oh wait, there's more, I guess.
Yeah, and Pertwee rules, by the way.
Good.
So all that
Get the
Pertwee
Wurzel
work.
box set.
Yes, I'm really looking forward to that. But all that Pertwee stuff, because Pertwee wasn't my first, but he was my absolute favorite. Absolute favorite. I just adore the pompous hair, the pompous frills, and the pompous velvet was just And the fact that he has a tattoo was fantastic.
Awesome.
And I totally would have thought that since he's a Navy guy, that would have been the swearing pinnacle right there, but apparently not.
Nope, it was Richard Herndl.
He actually was positioned in Portsmouth Dockyard. So I'm in Southampton, which is just down the road from Portsmouth. And that's where he was based during World War II.
Oh, yeah,
and that's where he nearly lost his life, with the bomb that came in. Yep. And they actually put him in the mortuary, didn't they? Because they thought he'd passed away and he woke up, and horrific. But if you get a chance, have a look online. It'll be somewhere, probably not anywhere legal, because I don't think it's on BBC Sounds at the moment, but the Pertwee, it was the John Pertwee Files we did for BBC Radio 4, hosted by Sean, his son. That's a lovely listen if you haven't heard it.
That's amazing. Richard, can you and I work with Russell Minton to help get some sort of commission to kind of look at the American side of how Doctor Who is presented over here? One of the things that I feel like that is really missing is are you aware of the Howard Da Silva intros and outros
Yes.
to the 97 Tom Baker episodes? And I was always felt like that's never been something that's always been kind of looked over by the BBC for the most part, especially it started in the DVD range over here, but I think it's an important part of the overall story, especially as we are looking at Australian continuity and other things that I really feel like that we're kind of running out of space to present those in the collection sets. And I really think that there needs to be something done with those.
That's a really, really good idea. Drop me a message about this
I will.
after this to remind me. But I'm fascinated, as a British person, I'm fascinated with the, is it the PBS pledges that were done surrounding them?
Yeah.
Because being British, the last thing anyone in this country likes to do is ask someone for money. And whenever you see someone who's an actor or someone who's known asking for funding, it feels odd, really, really odd for us.
Yeah.
And that shouldn't be the case. It may be the case in this country in the near future.
Yet you pay for your TV anyway through the licensing fee, regardless.
Yes, I know, it's a contradiction, isn't it? But maybe if the license fee was to go, we'll have to start begging for the funding for individual programs.
And you can get your TARDIS mug that materializes when you put hot water in it. I mean, it's quality. Lots of quality, and I have lots of great recordings. By the way, folks, I'm going to do a quick promo for myself on YouTube. From my channel is From the Archive 1. I do videos on the VHS releases of Doctor Who, but I also do a slant on how it's presented here in the U.S. And amongst that, I have a lot of different recordings from other stations around the country to see how they present Doctor Who. Well worth your time, especially the most recent one I released, An Unearthly Child. Okay, gentlemen, you have a question or comment?
Yeah, a different fandom. What currently is the fandom like for Quatermass and the original teleplays, and any word on any restoration of anything like that? What are our chances?
Yeah, it's very fierce over here. There's a real Quatermass place where people kind of gather, and I see a lot of that online. Of course, we had the release here. Greg's going to tell us again that you probably haven't had the release there. Did you get the Quatermass release?
No, we never got the DVD release or the restored Blu-ray release.
You need to get that. That's a thing of beauty. The restored Blu-ray from memory has a lot of sequences on it that were from 35mm.
Yep.
I think.
Yes, it is.
So the juxtaposition of that with some of the VT is obviously a bit jarring, but to see the 35mm is stunning. I know it's coming up for another anniversary for Quatermass soon, isn't it? Someone was talking to me about that the other day. But Blu-ray player and get the Blu-ray of Quatermass shipped in.
Yeah.
It's really worth it. Honestly, it is, isn't it, Greg?
It really is, and the funny thing is about the 35mm film sequences, meaning that they are not part of the recording when it was put out live, is that they were actually found after all 6 episodes of Quatermass in the Pit were broadcast. They did over 2 nights. They did a omnibus version, and the original film sequences for the location were spliced into those film recordings, and that was a surprise at the original restoration of it in 2005, 2006. So that was pretty amazing. And then also, Richard, 1984 with Peter Cushing from 1955. That was a BFI release over in the UK, which hasn't made its way over here yet. Most of the BFI stuff doesn't make its way over here unless it's licensed by someone else. So unfortunately, once again, not that we're telling you to break regions, but break regions. I mean, if you want to see this stuff, you really have to go do that. Richard, I want to talk a little bit. Amongst everything else, and you say you do this on the side, do you ever see your family? But also, you found, you're talking about you find some stuff, but I think the first time you and I ever really talked was because you had found a Hugh and I episode.
Yes.
And that's something else that you have, dipped your toe into, finding, missing episodes of stuff. Would you, if you're okay with it, would you mind talking a little bit about that, please?
Yeah, sure, certainly. So that Hugh and I, we have to say a big thank you to the late, great Terry Burnett. Now, Terry sadly passed away last year.
Oh, that's right, Terry, yeah.
Do you remember Terry? He returned the Underwater Menace episode 3 or 2?
2. Episode 2 of Galaxy 4.
Galaxy 4. And he was such a lovely, gentle guy. He worked at ITV, one of the regional stations that used to be down here. It's not so much now, but it used to make a lot of programs. Southern Television, TVS, Meridian. He was there during the TVS Meridian years. He was a collector. All of his colleagues nicknamed him Steptoe because he used to take all of the junk out of the skip as he was leaving every day and take it home and fix it.
Wow.
And he had an unbelievable collection of 405 line televisions. He built his own 405 line generator, and he could feed anything of any style or tape, 625, whatever, through it, and then to his 405 line televisions. He had all these radios, he had valves, crystal sets, and he also had a beautiful garage and home cinema setup. He had 35mm as well as 16, but 16 was what really infected him with that love and that passion. And he had got so many reels. They were stacked from floor to ceiling. And I remember going around, and I met him, and I met Rafe Montague, who's now Lord Montague of Beaulieu. And I met them for the first time to interview him for the 50th anniversary for a radio piece about him finding missing episodes of Doctor Who. And whilst I was there, I was just kind of in awe of everything. It was very hard to take it all in. There was so much. But I became friends with him, and we did a couple of radio shows together with some very old audio recordings he'd found. He had cylinders, he had 78 shellac records, and we broadcast some of those. But then as I went back, each time I'd look at the walls and the reels, and I noticed one time, I said, that one says Hugh and I. I'm sure that's the old sitcom. Let me go and check to see how many are missing. And I said, can you just unravel it? Let me know the name of this episode. And he did. And he said, oh, this is called The Girl on the Poster. And I looked it up and it was missing. And I said, this has to go back. And he said, do you know, I think that was in the same box as the Doctor Who's I bought. And I said, really? I said, well, what else have you got here? Is there anything else? He said, I can't remember, because he was an elderly person. He had no idea about missing episodes of television, despite going to many film conventions, film fairs every year. He just didn't know. And when Rafe it was that told him that those Doctor Who's were missing, he was genuinely surprised. He wasn't hoarding them. He didn't have them and think these have got value or these are special. He did not know they were missing until it was pointed out. And he was so kind to just give them back so they could be scanned and used. He wasn't, financially reimbursed at all for anything. He just did it out of the goodness of his heart. And the same with the Hugh and I. And his collection now was left, I was left the collection of audio recordings, which I've been going through with some colleagues at the BBC, and Rafe was left the collection of television material, and film material, 16mm, which we are both going through very slowly at the moment. There is so much there. We have already found missing programmes from ITV. We have yet to find any BBC missing programmes, but there will be some, because there is so much stuff there. There's a lot of junk, but there's some good stuff in there as well.
I just, and I want to thank you for telling us about Terry, because and we don't mean this in any particular way, but it's like, oh, we got this episode back, oh, his name was Terry, oh, that's nice, but, oh, we got this. And I'll only speak for myself, I don't want to speak for you all out there. But to be able to say, this is who this person was, this is why they had it, and this is why they weren't people, conduits to get episode back, they became friends. And I think that is, I really thank you for giving that context to it, because I've heard that before. I know Lord Montague, who is, I consider someone, it sounds very much like him in a sense, very gentle and very, so I'm sure that's why all of you got along very, very well. We have about 6 minutes left, it looks like. With that in mind, one of the things that I find that we actually talked about here with amongst people yesterday is exactly that. When a film collector passes, is there any way to make sure the word is out there that collection, and I know there isn't a foolproof way to do this, but that maybe some people might think that, we shouldn't just throw this out.
Exactly. That is the main concern that I have as well. There's a guy called John who's working on this amazing initiative called Film is Fabulous at the moment, where they are liaising with people who have substantial collections. This isn't some kind of a land grab. This isn't an opportunity for people to then build their own collection and hoard it. This is an opportunity for them to assist in making sure that if the person with the collection wants, the material goes to the right place. That is the most important thing. And there are people, I'm aware of people, that have substantial collections of television material, film material. Usually they're people that either worked in broadcasting or have a connection to someone in broadcasting, or they're just a rabid collector that's just bought up everything over many years. But those people, sadly, we have to be realistic here, are now getting old.
Yep.
And I have seen, there was a guy here in Southampton, I won't name names, but he had a substantial collection of 16mm film. He did at one point have Doctor Who material. It's anyone's guess whether he still had any, but there was a fire in his house, and it was shortly before he passed, and a substantial amount of the collection was burnt to pieces. No. And I can remember driving into my workplace, the BBC, past skips outside of his house full of twisted, melted film cans and reels, and thinking, why did this have to happen? You know, the guy was clearly quite struggling with what he had, and maybe someone could have come in and helped. And that's what Film is Fabulous is trying to do. I think they're the guys to keep an eye on. I think the important thing is to get material, get it to the right place, the proper archive, so it's either kept properly, and also so it's shown. And that's something that I'm always coming up against, whether it's commissioners, whether it's events or wherever, is trying to get an audience for this. Now, that Hugh and I episode, for example, I have no idea how that will ever be officially seen at this stage. Yeah. I would hope we would get to a point where a television channel would buy the rights to broadcast Hugh and I, and it would go out. Is that going to happen? That's probably unlikely. Is there going to be another physical release? Who knows? Possibly, possibly not. So what's going to happen to that material? I think there needs to be something that happens that gets the material out there so that it's actually seen and consumed and used. And I would love to do a piece with the BBC on how difficult some archives can be and how hard it is to either get to a collection, find stuff, but also to afford to be able to use it. Yeah. There was some Wurzel material that we wanted to use on the Down Under set from a British broadcaster, and I was quoted £38,500 for a 15-minute section off of a children's programme. And I said, look, this is for a DVD, a Blu-ray, and they wouldn't budge because it was the same rate card as if they were licensing an interview with Paul McCartney. And it's frustrating.
And as we're running out of time here, I would have loved to talk about my story with UCLA, because I think that's the same sort of thing with Hugh and I. Also with the Hugh and I loop. Since the release came out, I think there's 5 episodes now that have been recovered, if I'm not mistaken, something like that.
Yes, you're right. Yes.
So folks, I hope that you enjoy these certain kind of special type of interviews and talking about archival television and stuff like that. Please let this convention know that if you'd like to see more, let us know, because we can do more of these. Richard, this was so much fun. We could talk for another number of hours, I think, very easily.
Absolute pleasure. No, it's been a delight to speak to you, Greg. Thank you very much to everyone in the audience as well for being so kind and receptive. And always happy to talk about this. It's always good fun.
Thank you, Richard. And thank you all very much. Take care, Richard.
Thanks, guys. Take care. Bye-bye.